If we step into our power as mums, we create the space for our children to do the same. We create the space for our spouses, for our siblings, for our community to do the same.
Hi, welcome to Pwrmums podcast. I'm delighted to be joined by my friend Bex. Bex, welcome to the podcast. Do you mind introducing yourself to our viewers?
Sure. Hi everybody, my name is Bex Craig. I'm a mum, first of all, I'm a mum of 2 young boys. My eldest is 3.5 and my youngest is 18 months. And I'm also the CEO and founder of BX, which is a coaching and leadership development business focused on helping emerging leaders and emerging businesses fly.
Do you mind sharing a little bit about your story of where you came from and how you started your own business?
Yeah, sure. So having had a number of years in the corporate world and most recently with LinkedIn, leading different teams across the region, I had my first son, Darcy, and I was really grappling with how I could return into that environment, which was quite high paced, quite high stress, and working many hours and traveling a lot. How I could do that when we lived overseas with limited support from my family, etc. And so after some time agonizing over that decision and trying to find a way that I could return maybe part-time or take some extended leave, in the end I wasn't able to. And in the background in my head, I've been thinking a lot about what really drives me and what kind of work really motivates me, and thinking that I wasn't the only woman who had been through this experience either.
You're not special.
There's nothing special about me, let's just be clear. And so I actually decided I would take the chance to do a coaching course, and having had a coach at LinkedIn who had really radically changed the way that I viewed myself and thinking through what really mattered to me. And so this coaching weekend really was what propelled me forward to think about how I could take this work further, and in particular how I could work with women who, like me, had felt a real shift in their identity, who had felt that the challenge of learning about this new person that was a mum on top of all the other things that we are. And so that's what really drove me to set up the business. And today the business is primarily working with emerging leaders who are predominantly women, entrepreneurs, people that are in corporate leadership roles, who are perhaps at a transition moment in their life, and also working with businesses, whether that's startups or scale-ups, around themes like leadership development, leadership competency, and also themes around diversity and inclusion.
Awesome. So as a woman, I can come to you. Let's play a scenario. Let's
Sure.
say Kat.
Hi, Kat.
I come to you and I say, hey Bex, I've got all these ideas about where I want to go, but I'm not getting where I want to go. I don't really know how to get there. Do I want what I think I want? Can I come to you and get some guidance and kind of figure out where I want to go and kind of accelerate my rate of getting there?
So my practice, if you were to come to me as an individual, as
Kat
would come to me, my role really as a coach is not to be here as an expert in your life or to give you advice in your life. My role is really to help you maximize your potential and to give you the tools to do that. So I would ask questions like, what is it that you really want for yourself, and who are you now, and how does what you're doing right now help you get where it is that you want to be, the legacy that you want to create, the impact that you want to have in the world. So we tend to take a bit of a broader macro picture around that as well, which always helps, because when we're making decisions, when we're thinking about what do I want to do, or I'm not happy where I am, or I want to your words, accelerate what I'm doing more of, generally there's some hunger, there's a yearning for something else. And so my role is really to help make that aspiration as big as possible and to give you all the confidence that you can meet that regardless of any obstacles in front of you.
Wow. Okay, so you're not my therapist, but you're there to ask challenging questions that maybe if I'm on my own, I'm not going to have those questions, or I'm not going to have the answers to those, and to bring the best out of myself, just to give that direction?
Yeah, it's sort of to notice things that I see in you. So energy that you might have for something, or themes that come up often. And for me, coaching, the way that I was trained to coach, is really about two things. One is about deepening the learning, which is the reflection, the questions and probing, and then forward the action. So how coaching differs from therapy is historically therapy has always been about looking back to get to where you want to get to. Coaching is really very much about what is the future, what is the vision that I have, and how do I move forward from present into that future.
Okay, that's awesome. Someone called Kat might come and have a chat to you.
Well,
off camera at some stage.
Someone like Kat would be very welcome.
And you briefly mentioned your two boys.
Yes.
And there's not a huge age gap between them. So you obviously had two boys quite close together, and you started a business.
3 babies.
3 babies. Yes. And a husband.
4 babies.
So starting a business obviously has its own challenges. Starting a family has its own challenges. How did you merge the two together? And what were the challenges that you faced in starting a business with a young family?
Oh, it's a big question, and
the top challenge, maybe I should say.
Well, a lot of the women that I work with who have set up their own businesses always share similar stories with me. But I set up my business when my eldest was 1, and I had always had it in my head that I would restart work of whatever work was going to look like, whether it was a return into a corporate environment as in whatever role that would look like, or whether it was setting up my own business, which has always been something that I've dreamed of doing for myself. So when he was 1, I set the business up, and the first few months, as I'm sure is for anybody that sets up their own business, for you as well, there's a lot of admin and a lot of building your brand and getting out there, and it took a little while to get going, but I was really lucky to be able to tap into a network and to be able to leverage people who knew me and knew what I had done in the past. And then about 4 months in, I fell pregnant again with Jonty. So my business, the first few years of my business really was looking after a 1-year-old, being pregnant with my second, and launching the business, all throughout this. So it was pretty full on.
Yeah. Do you sleep?
Well, I had bumpy pregnancies as well. So I was very, very sick through both of them, and the whole way through with both of them. But yeah, do I sleep? Does any parent sleep?
I don't know. I think the really efficient ones learn not to sleep. I'm
in full awe of people that parent that have enough sleep. But yeah, I think the difference is that this was for me a passion. This was, my business is so much more than, any role that I've had in the past. This is really about something that is purpose-oriented for me. And so every day I wake up motivated to do the work that I'm doing.
And what gave you the confidence or the push to make that change, to go from, because I guess you always had a very, as you said yourself, like a very high-powered job, a high-energy job. And in some ways you were comfortable in the corporate environment.
Totally.
Which for me, I would never be comfortable, or I certainly wouldn't start off being comfortable in that environment.
Yeah.
What gave you the push and the confidence to go start your own thing and be a maverick?
Yeah, the first thought that comes to my head is my husband, who has known me we've been together for so many years now, and I think he often has a lot more belief in me than I have in myself. And as I had made the decision to resign, as I had decided that I needed more time, and as I was thinking through who really am I and what does it matter to me that I do in my life, I was starting to figure out that, my background was always around people, always around talent, always around helping maximize people's potential and coaching them to do whatever it was. And it was really, as I was discovering that Pete was giving me the gentle nudge, why don't you think about doing this yourself? And given that I had always thought that I wanted to have my own business, it was also an opportunity for me to give it a go and to lean into the discomfort, which it was, and just to see what might be possible and what I could do. Awesome.
So sometimes we need a gentle nudge.
Yeah, I think often.
Or a push.
I think often there's an amazing poem that I just absolutely love by Apollinaire, and he says, "Come to the edge," and they say, "I can't, I'll fall." He says, "Come to the edge." "I can't, it's too scary." something to that effect, come to the edge, and they did, and he pushed and they flew.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of amazing things happen outside of our comfort zone.
Things that you could never even... Things will fall into place when you're brave, I find. But
it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And also when you show up authentically and when you take on something that really matters to you, and it's vulnerable and it's scary and it's hard and there's a lot of fear, and there's definitely moments where I'm terrified, but I think that there's a lot of magic outside of the comfort zone.
And do you find that with your clients, because Bex doesn't just work with women, would women versus men need a bit more of a push sometimes? Or does it really depend on the individual?
Well, I do think it depends quite a lot on the individual. But what I notice is that as women, we often, especially mums, the narrative in our modern world around mums is to be the best mum, you need to be totally selfless. You need to put everybody else's needs first, and if you do that, then you're considered to be a good mum, a great mum. And so what tends to happen is then we measure ourselves against, everybody else that we see who we think is doing a great job, with this kind of total pursuit around perfection, which isn't that healthy. And so I do notice that for a lot of women, there is this need to build that inner strength and that inner confidence, and to lean into who they are really. Because when we were younger, we all thought we were great and we could do anything. And then slowly over the years, we're conditioned to think that we can't or that we shouldn't. And so I think sometimes men can be a little bit bolder in their aspirations, and they still have their own stories that they tell themselves. But for women, I definitely see that.
Yeah. Okay. And then having children yourself, has that changed your outlook or how you coach people?
Well, I think that having children, I'm sure that all of your listeners would potentially agree, or maybe you would share whether you agree. But I think that as parents, you suddenly, inside you is a lot of caring, nurturing. There's a lot. You're constantly looking after the needs of somebody else. And so I think that as a coach, one of the things that has actually helped me in my parenting is this belief that every human is naturally creative, resourceful and whole, which means I'm not trying to solve any problem for you, which means you're not something that needs fixing. Yeah. And when I've been raising my child, that's what I try to keep in mind, that they are themselves little geniuses who can do anything, and my role is really to create an environment where they can thrive. And so I think that's how the coaching has lent itself to parenting. But I think there is so many brilliant things about becoming a mum that translates then into your work. And I think that empathy and compassion is probably the greatest for me anyway.
Yeah, definitely. So we've kind of covered career Bex, but we haven't gone into too much detail about mummy Bex and pre-mummy Bex and who Bex is when she's not being a mum. So you've been in Singapore for quite a long time.
Yeah, so we've been in Singapore for over 7 years now. Wow. Yeah, so moved up with work years ago, and now we've got 2 children. We're permanent residents here.
Okay, so you moved here for how many years?
Well, my husband had never been. So we came up here with 2 years in mind, and I was just hoping that he would like it because he'd never been. Yeah. So now it's really hard to convince him that at some point we should leave.
You had 2 very similar pregnancies, but 2 very different births. So you were pretty poorly when you were pregnant.
I was really sick, and I think actually on your recent podcast, Amanda was talking about how she would say to anybody, take the drugs. And my story was similar actually. So for my first pregnancy, I literally was, really ill until about 7 months, about 7 or 8 months. And then with John T, my second, I had a not even 2-year-old running around. So I actually did take the drugs, and it made a big difference. So that was helpful, but I was still sick until, I remember at 36 weeks taking a tablet, thinking I won't take them, I'll be fine, and then I was still really sick. So, and we always joke because my eldest Darcy used to go mummy sick, because we would see that all the time.
You associated mummy with being sick.
But my first birth, so Darcy was breech. He had been in exactly the same position, squatting on my bladder from 20 weeks. So he was footling breech, which meant that no doctor would even consider delivering that naturally. So they were concerned about prolapse and all of those things. In any case, I had a cesarean with him. Everything went very, very smoothly. He had a little bit of jaundice, but he was fine. And then what was funny is when we got home, my husband would put him outside in the sun thinking that would help, and the pediatrician was like, no.
Doesn't it? We dangled Lana. We just put her out on the balcony.
Well, according to our pediatrician, it doesn't make any difference. But anyway, so that was experience for number one. And then for Jonty, I had another cesarean with him. And when I had the cesarean, the whole experience was quite different. They actually knocked me out because my placenta almost didn't remove. And then he had, they thought initially, wet lungs. And then it turned out that he had weak lungs because he was born at 37 weeks. And when they treated him with the CPAP in ICU, his lung collapsed. So I didn't...
The pressure was tubes, because CPAP is continuous, as a physio, continuous positive airway pressure. So it's almost like winding down the window of a car on the expressway and sticking your head out and trying to breathe. It's that kind of...
Right. So the issue was his oxygen levels. He wasn't getting enough oxygen through the system because his lungs weren't pumping it enough. And so, they needed pressurized oxygen. And, I remember every day, I mean, it was pretty harrowing because I couldn't get out of bed and I couldn't go and see him at all until I was able to walk in the hospital. I always do that.
It has been known to be called a hotel.
I always use those words interchangeably, especially in Singapore. So I wasn't even able to hold him. I didn't hold him until he was 7 days old. I didn't breastfeed him until he was 7 days old. So the whole experience was really different. We were lucky. We were only in there for 7 days, but it was a really stressful and harrowing experience. And all the things that we'd set up for our second child, like here's the present that he's giving to his older brother, and the whole meet and greet for Darcy in the hospital never happened. Okay. So the first time that he met Jonty, we were at home. Yeah. So for me, it just sort of brings home the fact that your actual experiences can be very different, and that's played out also in who they are as humans, because they are very different individuals as well. Yeah,
okay. That must have been very, very terrifying, especially because you would have had no idea going into that cesarean what was about to happen, because it would have happened very quickly.
Yeah, really quickly. And I think it never had crossed my mind. It never had, having had a healthy baby, having had a positive experience, it never crossed my mind that something difficult could happen. And so the whole experience of it was quite traumatic. And then because I also had issues in terms of the placenta and then almost a hysterectomy, there was also some question marks around then would I ever be able to have any more children. So the whole first little while, at least for Jonty, was very different and quite stressful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess we've done a podcast before about giving birth in Singapore without maternity insurance. It is an option for some people, sometimes by choice, sometimes not by choice. Did it make you very, very grateful to A, be in Singapore when this happened, and B, have good insurance?
Totally. I mean, I think that I can only say with such gratitude how the nurses and the doctors were. I'll get emotional talking about it. They were really incredible, and at the same time, it was also incredibly expensive. So thank goodness, we had not just insurance for me, but also insurance for the NICU, because the NICU is the ICU for children is really, really expensive as well. Yeah, and the difference that it can make to know that you're in a country where you can get access to really amazing world-class health care is amazing. And I always thought, like, when I was 34 weeks pregnant, I was in Bali on a holiday, and I keep thinking now, if I if I were lucky enough to have another child in my third trimester, I won't go. I mean, let alone the COVID situation, but I wouldn't go anywhere because I'd want to make sure that I was close to a quality hospital.
I was the same at 32 weeks. We were in Sydney, which Sydney would be fine, but the 7-hour flight, that, from my own experience, that would have been enough for me to have my baby. Right. Lana could have been born in midair. But anyway, but you mentioned that you weren't able to breastfeed for 7 days, but were the nurses able to support you in getting everything flowing? I think a lot of our mums will be there with you, knowing the struggle of getting the milk going.
Yeah, I mean, I think my body kind of knew what it was doing, and so my milk actually came in quite early. But it was strange. I mean, I was syringing TMI, but like literally
nothing is TMI.
Syringing milk out. And the nurses, instead of me having a baby that would latch, I would have a nurse come in and like help me syringe mils of milk out. But what was amazing was I was able to build up enough so that actually Jonty fed exclusively from breast milk in the first little while. Because initially he wasn't really well enough to take too much on board. But that in itself was another experience. And then, my milk never came in as strongly as it did when I had Darcy, which meant that I never really had the supply that I had for my first pregnancy. Yeah. So gone were the days of pumping, lots of excess milk or anything like that. So the whole experience was very different.
Completely different. And you kind of assume, you've had one experience, you kind of assume, okay, well that's me now, I'm a good milk producer.
Yeah, well, things change. Pete used to call me Bessie the cow.
Bessie the cow. Pwrmums is delighted to have Bessie the cow.
He'll be so thrilled that I shared that. So breastfeeding had never been an issue, and it really was. I remember the first day that we held Jonty in the arms and he was still attached to loads of different wires and everything. And then I said, when can I feed him? And when I finally did, I was so relieved that he latched and that all went smoothly, because I could imagine that would be another thing. And the nurses were saying to me, it's a whole other challenge when women actually can't produce the milk and they're trying to feed the baby in NICU. And so I was really blessed, and I had a lot of support from the nurses.
And that's so important. I remember the first few days, my milk did come in fine, but the first few days you're just trying to latch. I was trying to latch as much as possible, and I knew she wasn't getting anything, and she was screaming in hunger, and you're like, you just have to persevere.
Totally.
So then to have to wait to do that, and then kind of the anticipation of will it work, won't it work? So I'm very delighted that it did work for you.
Yeah, no, thank goodness.
Okay, so I guess to finish off, it would be great if you have any lasting thoughts for our viewers that you might want to share.
Yeah, I mean, I think the number one wish that I have in the world is to live in a world where everyone embraces all of who they are, whether that is a mum and a professional and a daughter and a sister, all the roles that we play, and play as big as we've got, because we've really only got one life that we're living. Maybe you have different beliefs, but I believe that we have one life, and you're not serving anybody if you play small and if you try to downplay what makes you a unique human, what makes you brilliant and what makes you shine. And so I don't know if it's a top tip, but I just think so often as we become new mums, or as we navigate through the challenging world of parenting and fitting in everything else that we've got, especially in COVID times when we're working at home and life and home and everything is all blurred, is that we are all worthy of living our best lives, and we are worthy of living a life that is brilliant and bold and big and brave. And so my hope is that more women and more people in general step into that, because when we do, that creates the ripples of change. If we step into our power as mums, we create the space for our children to do the same. We create the space for our spouses, for our siblings, for our community to do the same. And I'm just motivated to live in a world like that, because imagine what would be possible.
And that is where you are a power mum. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Kat.